when I came to Mass Effect 2, and they asked me to write Mordin, what was originally on paper was he's the scientist who is responsible for fixing the genophage. He couldn't be the scientist responsible for the original genophage because that was 1,000 years ago, and Solarians only lived to be about 40. But so basically, mad scientist Solarian. And on paper, and this isn't a limitation on anyone else's part. The great thing about writing for a team like this is they give you, here's what it is on paper, make something of it, go somewhere with it, trusting you to put your spin on things. And that was Drew Karpyshyn and Mac Walters, the leads on Mass 2. And I really didn't want to write him at first. I was against writing him because on paper, he's evil. And he is the guy who is responsible for sterilizing the Krogan, and that is ethically reprehensible, and I hated that guy. And I said, you're asking me to do an evil mad scientist, and I'm the guy who played through KOTOR and never got a single point of dark side because I am a light side hippie paladin player. So for me, the challenge was, how do I take that, do what the plot needs it to do, be true to the character, and not write a character that I hate and never want in my party?
Tall order.
And it was, a little bit. And it was really challenging. And what I had to do was say, okay, let's get beyond the paper. Let's get beyond the fact that this is a guy who did that. Yes, he made the genophage. Okay, that's a fact. That's established. Don't make him evil. Don't make him evil escape crazy Nazi scientist. Let's look at a guy who let's look at Oppenheimer. Let's look at someone who made something incredibly destructive and has to get up and look in the mirror every morning and say, yep, I did that, and it was terrible, and it was the right thing to do. And getting to that point was, for me, how I was able to write Mordin in Mass Effect 2. Finding a way inside the head of someone who would get to that point. And what was fascinating was that by the time Mass Effect 2 was done, my feelings on the genophage were different. Mordin, in the process of writing him, actually made me see the issue in a more nuanced light. And then, and what was interesting was that, then Mordin in turn changed his mind in Mass Effect 3 and took it to his own place. So it was hard. It is difficult to write someone who is, it's difficult to write someone who disagrees with what you think you believe as a person and isn't stupid. It's real easy to write someone who's stupid and disagrees with you. You want me to write a character who's dumb and has political beliefs I disagree with, I can do that for you in 10 minutes. But someone who, is smart, and part of the character concept is really, really smart. How do I make a really, really smart person who disagrees with me? And how do I make that honest?
When did you get to that point of realizing that you have this name on paper, you know that you need to make a doctor that did this terrible thing? How long in that process did you realize that, well, maybe he can actually have some kind of more than redeeming qualities, but be someone that would have made that hard choice? Is that just a testament to the character that you believe that you are? Like you said, you never make, when you play these games, you don't want to have a character that's like that. Or was this a longer sort of process to find that?
For me, it was in his loyalty mission. I loved Mass Effect 2's loyalty missions. I loved having an entire, usually 20 minute to half hour experience that was just a short story where this character got to be the star. You knew they were going to be there. It could be all about them. I loved that. And specifically, there's one scene where, there's scenes that advance the plot. Those are all important. Those are good for the mission. And two scenes. The first one where he finds the dead Krogan female, because the deal I made with myself was, that Mordin cannot be in denial about this. He's too smart for that. And if you say, you did this, you're responsible for it. No, I'm not. Nothing is wrong. Everyone is fine. Well, no, that's garbage. That's not a real character. It is a real character, but it's a real character who is in denial and who is kind of ultimately a coward hiding from their own actions. And I didn't want to write that. So I had to write the scene of him finding the dead female Krogan and running the tests, scanning her body and saying, yep, this is what happened, this is what she did, and having him acknowledge the cost of what he did. Having him own it and say to Shepard, yes, this is a thing I caused. And did you think I didn't look in the mirror and acknowledge that? Do you think I don't see that every time I wake up in the morning? Yeah, I did this. And I did think it was the right thing to do. And it's still horrible. And it's going to live with me every day. But it was necessary. And I think that for me was the moment where I got him. That he was intelligent and he was so committed to finding solutions that there's no way he's going to lie to himself. Because if you lie to yourself, you're not getting the right data. And he's more committed to the truth than he is to anything else. And then on the emotional front, not like that isn't the emotional front, but when he finally gets to his student who, he thinks he's rescuing, but the student has in fact betrayed him, and the student is railing at him and is, giving the angry adolescent attack on the genophage. Mordin, you're a monster. Mordin, you did this. Mordin, you did that. And I'm going to betray you. And all of this was wrong. And Mordin having to defend himself, but not defend himself by saying, I was right, you're wrong, but having to defend himself, initially, he's going to kill the student. Initially, he is so angry to this, and you pull it back, and you talk to him later, whether you let him kill his student or not. You talk to him later, and having him have to realize that, yep, that's basically young me I was dealing with. That was the version of me who didn't ask the hard questions and doesn't look at himself in the mirror. That's who I just had to face down there.
You talked then about two very different ways this incredibly emotional story can hit a climax. How do you make the character actually seem not even necessarily likable, but how do you stop the players from instantly just reloading a save after they unintentionally allowed Mordin, or made a choice to allow Mordin to kill, in this particular instance, his former student and have that impact on him? How do you make these characters convey the wrong choices, quote unquote, for the player, but still, not hit a reload? Because there were some times that happened with me, and it's a really fascinating thing, I imagine, to be in the writing position and to try and make it seem bad, but not so bad that I reload.
Yeah, I think it's a fun challenge, and there are times when yes, you want to say, yeah, you let him kill him, and then this is in the dirty writer tricks pool. You just have them thank the player. He guns down Malin, he guns down his student, and then he turns to Shepard and says, thank you. This isn't how I hoped it would go, but I really needed this, and now I finished this business, and I really appreciate that. And the player's like, well, okay, that's kind of sad, and that wasn't really what I was hoping would happen, but he did thank me. And if you're emotionally invested, having someone thank the player, the two things you can have people do, and both of them require that you trust the player. You have to have enough faith in your abilities as a company, not just as a writer, because you have to sell the facial expressions, you have to sell the art. The artists who made Mordin and gave his face so much character are just as responsible as I am. But you have to trust that if Mordin says to the player, I need help with something, that the player will want to do it. And you have to trust that when Mordin thanks the player, that the player is going to feel like that's a reward. And it's funny because writing writing thank you and writing I need help, it's really daunting, and you really have to believe that your character is worth it, because it's, not the polite thank you, but the real thank you, this was an emotional moment thank you. It feels so hokey the first time you write it in the tool set with no voiceover and probably with typos, given my typing. And you just have to look at that. For us, it's on the Mass Effect tool set, it was, a blinding white background and red text that you're typing on. And you have to look at that.
Really?
And it was not the most readable. You have to look at it, and you have to trust that someday a cinematics person is going to give him the right expression, and the art is going to support this alien with, horns on his head and maybe scales, and I don't know if he has like beagle coloring on his face, but it's not normal cut, it's not human coloring. It's easier than Tally. At least there is a face there. Mm-hmm. But you have to trust that all of that is going to come together in a way that when they says, "Thank you, Shepard,"
my mistake, thank you,
that the player is going to feel it and feel the sincerity and go, okay, wow, we just had a moment. I had a moment with somebody I cared about, and, we're closer as friends now because of that. And it's daunting, but if you get there, it's also the most rewarding thing you can ever imagine.
Powerful words, again, looking into the world of Mass Effect with writer Patrick Weeks, talking all about Mordin. You talked about how there has to be a lot of faith, in your words being interpreted and created and presented in the right way. After you wrote it on that blinding screen, how involved were you in the process after that?
So the way our writing works is we write it, we edit it, it goes, the writers edit it, revise it. It goes over to the editing team, and we put in voiceover comments for every single line of dialogue that says, for the actor, I'd like this to be delivered angrily, I'd like this to be delivered softly. And then it goes over to the voice actor, who works with a director on each of the conversations. And we are really, really lucky because asking an actor to go through non-linear dialogue, to go through dialogue that, this is the part where if Shepard was mean to you and you're angry at, and this is the part where if Shepard was nice to you and and this is where you're a romance, and this is a state that checks if you did something in a previous game. It's so easy for actors to get lost. And that's not a slam on the actors. It's you're looking at something, you're looking at a script, and it's not like a movie script. It's like 4 movie script, except some of the lines are the same. Mm-hmm. And that's where we rely on our voiceover directors. Caroline is just amazing, and on key scenes, she will have sometimes the actors have the writers sit in as well to say, okay, can you give some context here? Can you explain what's going on? Or the actor isn't sure about this line. What's going on here? Is this angry like I've been betrayed and I'm sad angry, or is this angry like I've got a gun and I'm going to shoot someone angry? It's we are fortunate to work with Caroline and with the cinematics guys to make sure that we're always on the same page and that we're all trying to make the same scene.
Well, going back to Mordin and his involvement in Mass Effect 2, there's also, beyond that beautiful scene where you can really make some powerful choices, there is also a lot of fun. We get to hear him. Why don't you take it from there, Patrick?
So, late one night, I was trying to figure out what to do with Mordin after you do his plot. And the thing is, his plot is emotionally wrenching, and it puts you through the ringer, and I really felt like the player needed some kind of reward, because you cannot really love someone as a character who is nothing but a downer, who is nothing but, I sterilized these people, and my student betrayed me, and now I'm really sad. You can feel sorry for them, but they can't be, there's only so far you can go with that emotionally. And so we made the decision that, because he's a Solarian and they They process emotions much faster than most people, that it was okay to have him go to other places, just kind of as a reward for the player. And my wife did a lot of Gilbert and Sullivan before I came and worked at Bioware. She did community theater. She's an awesome soprano, and I saw a lot of Gilbert and Sullivan and decided that it would be fun if Mordin sang a little bit.
You performed Gilbert and Sullivan?
I am the very model of a scientist Solarian. I've studied species Turian, Asari, and Batarian. I'm quite good at genetics as a subset of biology because I am an expert, which I know is a tautology. My xenoscience studies range from urban to agrarian. I am the very model of a scientist Solarian.
Inexplicably, it was allowed into the game. And
Inexplicably?
And we have this, there are some times where you're like, yep, this is good. And there are other times where you're like, I'm going to put it in because I think it's awesome. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to put it there, and I'm going to see if my boss, is he laughing or is he cutting it? And I don't know, it's probably, nope, he's laughing. Okay, that's going to the next step. There are things where I can't guarantee that's going to ship, but if it does, that's going to be great. And, it was just fun. And it's the little goofy bits that also make the world a little bit larger because, again, no real person is, completely soul-crushingly serious and grim all the time. You look at, real soldiers, when they're on duty, they're fighting for their lives. Yeah, they're serious, but also they're taking time to make jokes because that's the only way you stay sane under that kind of stress. Mm-hmm. And, so in the middle of this conversation where he's talking about the collectors being horrible people and, it's okay to kill them because they've repurposed themselves to the point where they're basically just tech now, and that's really awful. And I'm like, okay, well, I got to put some levity in here, or this is the most depressing thing ever, and therefore songs.
Well, you act like it, and you say it's a funny little break, I assume, but we go to the third game, talk about motif, it comes back in, or at least some, humming of it in a really big way in one of his, most impactful scenes, I say. I assume that's what's being hummed, but his death.
Yeah, so there are always things you hope for. There are always things you wish. When you start a new game, especially a new game that uses characters, that you weren't done with in the last game. And the sad but true fact of life is that 95% of those things you look at and you go, oh man, it would be awesome if Tally's arc concluded like this. And then by the time it actually happens, you realize, wow, no, that was a terrible idea. That didn't work at all. There are 100 reasons that's bad, and here's where we get to. And it's really good how it does end. And I'm happy with how Tally's arc ended, but it wasn't exactly what I had in mind. Just because the way the game went, changed it. And
what did you have in mind originally?
With Tally? I can't even remember anymore. I just remember the number of iterations we went through between the Gethkorian War. It was, the number, who was on the Reaper side, who was being controlled by the Reapers, because someone had to be controlled by the Reapers. You can't just say, yeah, we're telling the story of this war about the Reapers, and then here's several plots that are about this completely unrelated war. It had to tie in, but it went through so many iterations. And, fortunately, because I'm really, really happy with what came out of it, it's much better than what went, it's much better than my first drafts. But Mordin, the one thing, John Dumbrow, who did the Tuchanka arc, the Krogan arc, he and I talked, and I said, okay, Mordin can't be a follower. We already established that he was pretty old, and this is, it's going to be huge battles. We need to send him out in a way that does him justice. And I say, there obviously it's going to be a game with choices, so there are different ways this could play out. But the one that would work for me is he's somewhere, he's curing the genophage, he's up somewhere, and something's falling apart, and he gets halfway through the song. My xenoscience studies from urban to agrarian. I am the very model of boom. and then the explosion cuts him off, and if we do it right, every player who cares is going to finish the line in their heads as that tower explodes. And that is, I think, the one thing that we carried through start to finish. That, John Dombrow and I had that vision and went, "Yep, that's what it's going to be." And everyone we brought that to said, "Yes, that is absolutely how it's going to be." And wow, I just love that scene.
I think you are not the only one in that respect, but it's amazing. So that was the idea that you had originally for how long before? How do I phrase this? How long before you came up with that idea that this is how you wanted it to end versus the completion of that story arc? Was it a significant amount of time?
Oh, yeah. It was, let's see. So from 10 to 12, counting down from when voiceover got locked to when cinematics got locked, it was a year and a half.
Really? And so many other things would have changed.
Oh, yeah. That's what, when I say that the Geth Quarian campaign changed a lot, I don't mean that it was done casually or capriciously. It's just the realities of game design. Hey, it turns out we don't have this combat model you were relying on. Hey, it turns out vehicular combat isn't fun, so we're going to cut the part where you're fighting in a vehicle. So many different things that can happen that way. And yeah, this was just the one scene that we all looked at and went, well, this is going to work. And, just happy to see it come down that way. And again, like we were talking about on Tally, there are so many different story arcs. There's the possibility that you are, not that the player is ever wrong in any decision they make, but you could be horrible Shepard and you could have shot Mordin in the back. Or you could be, grim, still kind of horrible, but also efficient Shepard, and you could have talked Mordin out of it in a very rare case, out of going up to cure the genophage. Or he could have died in Mass Effect 2, and you're dealing with a completely different character. So there are all these, there are all kinds of different things, and of course, on one level, you try to say, yes, these are all equally valid choices, but really like you and I said earlier, there is the one, there is the authentic one, and the authentic one for me is him never finishing that song so that everyone who cares about him finishes the song for him.
Absolutely beautiful. I so many people agreeing with your characterization of him right now. I would say, though, it was amazing to see if you did get everything right, and Mordin does begrudgingly agree that he doesn't need to actually stop it. And I think in that instance, there need to be choices made in the second game as well. But just like you, looking through on Twitter and YouTube and Twitch and seeing people that were able to find that story arc and get it just perfect, it actually created something that, at least in my opinion, was comparable. Now, could you go over that a little bit? That choice to make the most absurd and obscene end of that storyline actually seem palatable to someone like me who's been, a Mordin fan from the beginning.
Well, it's tough, and this is, I've talked about the challenges of the YouTube and Twitch side of things, seeing your stuff out of context and having to explain that no, there were 20 hours of conversation before you got to that love scene. That's actually not as goofy as it looks as you look at it. But the awesome side is getting to see how the other half lives. And I think that, so in this particular case, it was something that originally it wasn't in there. It was a strict, Mordin either goes up or you shoot him. And, we looked at it and we wrote it and we did a good job. And then we all kind of collectively looked at it. And it's not like it was ever objectively wrong and we hated it. It was, we would play it and then we would kind of go, because in the one case, if Mordin had destroyed the genophage data, which meant that Eve, the Krogan female, that meant that she died. So there was no hope of Eve being this powerful guiding force for the Krogan going forward. And if Rex from Mass Effect 1 had also died, if you shot Rex on Vermeer, all the way back in Mass Effect 1. Then Reeve was in charge, and Reeve is a terrible commander, and, good for the Krogan, but bad for everybody else. Just looking at, okay, Reeve is going to be awful, and Eve, the Krogan, the Krogan female, is not there to act as a stabilizing influence. We all kept looking at that scene going, this just doesn't make sense for Mordin.
Mm-hmm.
And, I guess in some ways that's the mark of a good character, where you can see, yes, I've done what I set out to do writing-wise. You either shoot him or he goes up the tower, but you look at that, and that's not true to his character. Mordin is always open to data and facts and logic and knowledge. And when presented with, okay, we have a powerful Krogan warlord with plans to be an evil dictator and no one to put him in check, Mordin has to back off at that point, or at least has to have the option of backing off at that point. We looked at it and said, okay, there is an obvious hole here where it doesn't fit his character.
We talked before about the difficulty of making players care about a whole species, a whole race, a whole country, and how easy it is to make them care about a specific character. Mm-hmm. Who does Mordin represent in that analogy? What are you trying to make the player care about with a character like Mordin? And his death or his life, what does that do to that goal?
That's an interesting question, because, the easy answer is that he's supposed to represent the Solarians, but he doesn't, because he's going against their interests. Mm-hmm. He's trying to cure the genophage. I think Mordin is the hope of redemption. And he is the hope of someone who has done something terrible and can look you in the eye and say, I did it, I believed it was the right thing, and I think it needed to be done. But that being said, I also want to find a way to make this right. Because now looking at it, I'm a different person now. And it's a story about, can someone change? And not just, we have a lot of, in science fiction and fantasy and comic books and shows, there's, now this person's a villain, now this person's a hero. And I think those are really easy binaries. But it's a lot harder and honestly a lot more applicable to say, can you, for most average people in everyday life, can I change my political beliefs? Can I look myself in the eye and say, wow, that stuff I believed when I was 15, I was totally wrong. I'm a different person now, and I'm older, and there is no shame in me saying that I disagree with my past self. Mm-hmm. So there's an aspect of hope there. And for the player, it's trying to choose between the hope, it's Mordin's desire, because, as much as I love Mordin, he's not the protagonist in this scene. Shepard always has to be the protagonist. So it's Mordin's desire for redemption and proving that he has the ability to change, and weighed against the hope and the danger of the Krogan. It's the Krogan saying, we have the ability to change. Yes, what was it, 2,000, 1,000 years ago? Maybe the Krogan did need to be sterilized. I, Patrick, still don't agree with that, but Patrick wasn't there when the Krogan were running rampant across star system after star system, enslaving and bombing people. So if that was the only way to stop them, maybe it did need to happen. Have they changed, though? Is there hope for them? And so really it's a redemption for the Krogan, and it's a redemption for Mordin.
Speaking to these greater concepts of redemption, what these stories mean, and these characters representing bigger ideas and bigger things, what do you think, talking to the whole Mass Effect series, it's finished, and especially the third one, someone like Shepard, what do they, in your estimation, represent, and what do you want them to feel like? And even the Mass Effect franchise, what is the final message that you believe this space opera has to say about us?
Well, I think Shepard is fascinating because we gave Shepard a voice. And it was, it's funny because, the Mass Effect trilogy has been done for several years now, and it seems like old hat. But at the time, that was a completely new thing for us, giving our protagonist a voice and giving our protagonist an inherent character. And we weren't sure if that was going to be too limiting, but as it turned out, what it did was it let people figure out for themselves what kind of story they're telling. If you are the player who's going around reading codex entries, exploring, then this is kind of a science fiction exploration of themes and concepts, and looking at different races and different philosophies. If you are going off and having fun and shooting stuff, then this is a science fiction action movie. And for many people, if it's about the characters and the relationships you form, it's for want of a better term, it's a space opera. It's you and your friends and your future love interest adventuring across the galaxy, and those are all equally valid ways of looking at Shepard. Which I think is fascinating, and I would love to say we totally did that on purpose, but I think it was, I think it was an interesting thing that we were exploring, and definitely honed as we moved through the trilogy. It's going to be interesting to see where the Mass Effect franchise goes next. Now, overall, I would say for me, I think that Mass Effect is about organics and synthetics. People and machines. And it's about the relationship between them, the fear that we depend on machines, we fear machines. I am at the point now where I call my iPhone my second brain. I don't remember my friends' birthdays anymore. My phone does that for me. And Mass Effect is in many ways the study of that. It's a study of that contrasted with the study of what makes people, I think. And, once again, I'm really proud of what we did in the trilogy exploring those questions. And I'm looking forward to seeing what the future team does with it.
You performed Gilbert and Sullivan?
I am the very model of a scientist Solarian. I've studied species Turian, Asari, and Batarian. I'm quite good at genetics as a subset of biology because I am an expert, which I know is a tautology. My xenoscience studies range from urban to agrarian. I am the very model of a scientist Solarian.